Hey, it's Elaine. Welcome. There has never been a better time to start a meditation practice. If you've been curious about meditation, but you just don't know how to get started, our guest today is here to show us how. Josh Cohen is a lawyer and Toronto-based yoga and meditation instructor. He has over 20 years of experience practicing and teaching meditation and has conducted numerous workshops and seminars in Toronto and in various locations abroad. He leads the mindfulness components of several yoga teacher training programs and specializes in teaching beginners the principles of establishing a meditation practice. Josh, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Elaine. It's great to be here.
So I'd love it if you could take us back to your introduction of yoga. You have a wide array of experiences, and especially with your career and expertise in law, I'd love it if you could share with us how and why yoga has become such an important part of your life.
Okay, sure. I'd be happy to share that. I've definitely had an unusual path. I didn't find yoga until I had already completed law school. And so the summer between graduating law school and then articling and writing the bar exam, I went out to BC where a friend was living out on Main Island. And she had a old VHS tape of Patricia Walden doing a yoga class. And so I tried it. I was curious. At that time, this would have been the year 1999. Yoga was starting to become more and more popular, but I didn't know anything about it. So I tried the tape, and the first time you're doing it, you're trying to figure out, am I doing it right, and so forth. But I enjoyed it, and then I did it again the second day. And when I did it again the second day, I found that I was more in the flow, and I was getting even more benefit out of it. So when summer ended and I went back to Toronto, I took out some videos out of the library. This was also pretty much pre-internet, pre-YouTube streaming and all of that. And I would practice on my own for about 45 minutes to an hour while I was doing bar school. And what I noticed pretty quickly is that it started to change the way I felt physically and even the way I walked. So there was a moment when I was going to a movie and I was walking down the road, and I realized that my gait had changed, that the way I was striding was longer and felt more comfortable. And I knew at that moment that yoga was very important and that I wanted to continue with it. Then when I was doing the bar exam, when the way they did it back then is you would write an exam every 2 weeks on one particular field in the law, I would notice how my yoga practice was benefiting me, because if I got a little bit flustered or I wasn't sure about an answer to a question, my physical body immediately reacted with tension. And so I was able to cue into it because of my yoga practice teaching me how to relax and how to lengthen my muscles, such that I could release that tension. And by releasing that tension, it freed up the energy that was going into resistance to be able to focus on the question and concentrate a little deeper. So that was how I started doing yoga. But after I got called to the bar in February of 2001, I decided to take some time off, and I started to, again, go to the library and take out books. And this time it was on Buddhism, because Buddhism, like yoga, was also becoming very much in vogue. And I didn't know anything about it. So I took out a book, and it really started to speak to me. I really realized how there was meaning in the teachings, and they were very direct and scientific in a sense. And so it inspired me to travel to India, because I think also I didn't really want to go right back into law, into the workforce. I kind of wanted to milk out the student part of my life a little longer. And while I was over in India, people were describing and encouraging me to do this 10-day silent meditation course, and it was called Vipassana. And I ended up going to do this up in the foothills of the Himalayas in Dharamsala. That's where the Dalai Lama and the exiled Tibetans are headquartered. And they had this meditation center there. It's by donation. Very rustic, but also very beautiful, because you had these vistas of the mountains and eagles soaring over. But it was 10 days of silence, and it was 10 very challenging days. Though along with the challenges came also immense experiences of levity and happiness and bliss. And taking that course really helped to instill the fundamentals of mindfulness and Vipassana, and allowed me to continue forward with it. It instilled a practice, daily practice. And I came back, and instead of going back to law, I decided to do a yoga teacher training. And I did that for an 8-month course at Downward Dog in Toronto. And it just, one thing led to another. They asked me to start teaching restorative and some morning meditation classes. And I ended up doing it for a decade. I branched out, I started teaching all around the city. And it was quite a formative time in my life. It enabled me to have a lot of freedom in the structure of my day. So I could wake up, I could go to the studio, I could do my own practice for a couple of hours, come home, make lunch, and then go off and teach in the afternoon for 2 or 3 classes. And those were my days for a long time. And along with that, it gave me the freedom to go and do more of these 10-day silent retreats. And as synchronicity would have it, they opened up the same type of center in near Barrie, so just north of the city. And I would go and I would do 10-day retreats, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a year. And so each time I would take a course, it would deepen my equanimity, it would deepen my sense of stillness, and really entrenched in me the fundamentals of meditation. And then I was able to help share that with other people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to mention, actually, I've been to India several times, and I did my teacher training in India, and I had a Vipassana also scheduled in Dharamsala, but unfortunately I got sick and I had to cancel it. So I do hope to make it up to maybe Barrie, or if I get a chance to go back out to India, I think I'm definitely going to register for Vipassana. I'd love if you could share with our listeners today, you're mentioning the fundamentals of mindfulness. Can you share with our listeners maybe the difference between meditation and mindfulness for anybody that doesn't know the difference?
Sure. Okay. Well, mindfulness is a subset of meditation. So meditation is like this broad umbrella that encompasses many different techniques, one of which is mindfulness. And mindfulness is the Western definition or translation of Vipassana. And you heard me talking about Vipassana earlier. And Vipassana is a Pali word, which is like a language related to Sanskrit, that the historical Buddha spoke back in northern India, which I believe is now also Nepal. And it basically translates to insight. So Vipassana means like looking inwards, inward sight. And John Kabat-Zinn, he's become quite a popular meditation instructor, writer. He's a doctor. And what he did is he took the fundamental foundations and principles of Vipassana and made it into a more accessible for the Western mind program. And he called it mindfulness. And it's now taught in many different schools, but mostly in hospitals and counseling centers as a stress reduction technique. And so they have like a 6 or an 8-week course that people enroll in, and it really helps them to learn how to mediate and balance the stress that they incur or may be experiencing from past trauma. So mindfulness is about focusing your attention in the present moment, whatever happens to be arising. And that is the basics of mindfulness. Now, there are other types of meditation that are more mantra-based. And a mantra is a syllable or a string of syllables that you repeat over and over to yourself to help settle the thinking mind and bring it back into the here and the now. And mantra-based is most widely known as the principle or the technique of Transcendental meditation, or TM. And so it's repeating this syllable over and over again. And the way TM has done it is, in a sense, they've commodified it in that the teacher of Transcendental meditation will give you an individualized mantra. So they'll talk to you, they'll get a feel for you, and they'll say, okay, here's your mantra, repeat this. And an example of a mantra could be something like so, hum. So like on the inhale, you'll say so, and on the exhale, you'll say to yourself, hum. And you're saying this in your mind to yourself, not out loud. And mantra-based meditation techniques are very effective to bring your attention into the present moment and focus you. But what I had a little bit of an issue with, or what didn't quite resonate with me, was the necessity to have to keep generating the mantra, the actual verbalization in your mind of the syllable or the string of syllables. because it still required that effort and that sense of yourself, where in mindfulness, you're actually relaxing all effort. And the idea is to try to get to the experience where things are just happening on their own, and there's not really a you that things are happening to. Things are just happening, and you are part of the field or the space in which everything is arising. The other benefit to mindfulness that really appealed to me is how much it emphasizes working in the fields of sensation. And with the mantra based, again, it's more of a cerebral practice where you're thinking the syllable and so forth. So it may prevent the ability to really feel what's happening throughout your body. And I've tried everything, and for me, mindfulness was the technique that I gravitated towards. And I certainly recommend it to everyone who's exploring what type of technique they want to practice in meditation, to certainly try a mindfulness-based technique.
Mm-hmm. This is so interesting, and what I find the deepest hooks into how powerful this can be is when we talk about trauma, and I love that you brought that up. Because when people experience a traumatic event, they often rehearse it over and over and over again. I'd love it if you could share with us some of the supporting science behind meditation and mindfulness, and maybe even talk a little bit about how a daily meditation practice can actually change our brain and even help build tolerance towards really difficult emotions.
Sure. Okay. So I'll start with the physical side to the question, which is how does it change our brain? What's the science behind it? And then make sure I don't forget to get back to more of the past trauma and the psychological side of it. So on the physical side of it, what we are doing is we are basically teaching the brain to reroute itself or rewire itself. So for example, the brain has been evolving over time. And so we can see how there are parts of our brain that are more primitive in nature, and then areas of the brain that have evolved afterwards and are more recent in our evolution. And the reactive responses that we have that are almost automatic until you start to meditate stem from the more primitive aspect of the brain, a primitive side of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is responsible for the fight or flight response. So when we were younger in our evolution, there was, of course, predators around. We were more warlike, etc. So there is this need to become very alert to our environment and be at all times either running or perhaps like fighting. And so this kept us in this state of stress. And what we're learning with meditators is that the more that we sit and meditate, the more that we are taking the external stimuli that's coming into our awareness and rerouting it away from that primitive amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And the prefrontal cortex is most recent in our evolution, and it's the higher decision-making part of our anatomy, part of our brain. So things like compassion and decision making and analysis and all of this happens in the prefrontal cortex. So as we meditate more and more, we're learning to let go of the immediate reactive type of responses that the amygdala might do and begin to put more attention, more circulation, more energy towards the prefrontal cortex. Such that when any external stimulation comes into our awareness, the prefrontal cortex picks it up and has the opportunity to decide, is this actually a threat? Or is this something that I don't need to invoke the amygdala and release all the hormones and get our fight or flight response going in the body? So what they've also seen through MRIs is that the meditators who practice for as little as 8 weeks actually start to thicken that part of their brain, the cortex. So they can see that the gray matter thickens in as soon as 8 weeks of practice. So it doesn't take that long even to start to notice that there are actual physical differences that happen in your brain that help you to become more and more balanced in the sense that you now have a greater control of how you're going to react to an event. where before you might have been very just reactive, automatic. We didn't even realize you were going to do it. It was like a reflex. And now it's becoming more of a decision-making process. So that's the physical side of things. Now on the psychological side of things, you mentioned things like past trauma and past experiences. And what is happening when we meditate is that we're basically sitting in a quiet, safe space. And simply by virtue of not occupying our attention with the external world, now we're starting to allow the inner stock of memories to begin to surface to our awareness. And they start to arise because the silence that we're sitting in starts to pull them out. And now we have the opportunity to re-experience them and learn in our practice is to mediate them. So we developed something in Vipassana and mindfulness that's called equanimity. And equanimity is similar to equipoise. So they have that same root of equa, which is like to be equal to something. And we want to become more and more equal to both intense sensations and also subtle sensations. We want to become more and more equal to sensations that are based in a fear response or a fear scenario, and on the same token, to become more balanced with sensations that have to do with desire, things that bring us pleasure. We have to realize that both fear and desire are basically two sides of the same coin that keep us on this roller coaster of attachment and aversion responses. So we develop these habit patterns of attaching to things that are pleasurable and pushing away things that are negative in some way. But that attachment or that aversion, that type of response, it actually is the very essence of why we end up suffering. So with something negative, it's very easy to see why we're suffering right in the moment, because something's happening, and if you're reacting with that negativity or that tension, immediately you're throwing out your equanimity and you're feeling that uncomfortableness of the resistance. It's a little harder to see how when you attach to something that's pleasurable, how it creates suffering. But what happens is it creates suffering in the future. So to the extent that you become attached to something, whether it's a particular feeling or a person or a situation that you're in, ultimately that sensation, feeling, or person is going to change in some way. And so to the extent that you've identified and attached to it is the extent that you will suffer afterwards, because you're going to start craving it. You're going to start wanting to replace it and keep that sensation going. And this is really the basis of any kind of addiction type of process, is you start to enjoy a particular, it could be a substance, it could be a person, it could be dopamine that you're getting from lots of likes on social media, whatever it might be. And when that external sensation or stimulation subsides or reduces, then you're going to be left wanting it again. And that's how this addiction process gets going. And so as a meditator, we're learning how to break it right at its roots by mediating to the surface and uprooting all the different ways that we've created these habit patterns in our mind to attach to pleasure and resist pain or displeasure or anything that's uncomfortable. And so what will happen over time, and I can share with you a quick story from the very first time I did a 10-day silent retreat. I remember it was day 7, so I'd already been in it quite a bit. And in the morning we were at breakfast, and you know, you haven't spoken to anybody. You've been in silence this whole time. And so it starts to draw to the surface your past experiences. Now for me on this particular day, I had heard and watched when I was young, like 2-3 years old, that had really, I guess, shaped me, or at least it ingrained in my mind, in my psyche. And here was this silence drawing it up to the surface for me to re-experience it again and realize how much it had actually conditioned and shaped my brain. That was kind of a positive way, but there are other times where I thought that someone close to my family had passed away, like my grandfather at the time. And it created this immense flood of sadness and grief, to the point where I couldn't get off the cushion and I was just crying for 20 minutes. And eventually I got control of myself and And it turned out he was fine and nothing had happened. But afterwards, I was no longer afraid of death. And really, fear had been more or less eliminated from my mind ever since that time. And it was interesting how whenever I was around my grandfather, who was starting to deteriorate a little bit, I was so like relaxed, and I wasn't in any way trying to change him. And it helped him to become more present and connect with me.
Mm-hmm. This is all so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. It reminds me a lot of the work that Dr. Joe Dispenza is creating. Are you familiar with him?
You know, I've heard a couple other people brought that up to me, but I'm not very familiar with him, no.
Okay, well, he shares a lot about, you know, brain and heart coherence, and he talks a lot about the body being on a different program, and the body sort of holding our experiences, and the body really being our subconscious mind, and then obviously our brain is sort of the conscious mind. I think so many of us can get really consumed in our intellect, and we lose connection to this sort of felt sense awareness of our bodies and our intuition. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of this felt sense awareness and how someone can reconnect with it again?
Sure, absolutely. And that's a great point. You know, back in the more primitive times, the work of a spiritual practice was to raise energy up through the system. So we were very primal in our roots and not as developed cerebrally and consciously. But in our modern society, we're so stimulated by stimulation all over the place, whether it's having electric lights and keeping the lights on at night, and of course all the screen time we have and all the advertisements and so forth, that our work is actually to help bring the energy back down and connect with our more grounding primal sense of ourselves. And so the way that yoga, meditation, and so forth, what they're trying to do at the beginning of the practice is help to develop a greater and greater sensitivity to our bodies. So any type of movement practice, any type of meditation practice, we're trying to slow down the mind. We're trying to like get it to come out of its time-oriented basis, where it's always like thinking and analyzing the past, or it's anticipating what might happen in the future. We're trying to just get it back into now, here and now. And so that's what the movement, the asanas is doing. That's what like running can be doing, or writing or reading. You know, when you get into a good book, you're like really in the moment, you know, your mind is not wandering at all. The nice thing about the physical practices like yoga is that it helps to lengthen the body, stretch the body. In essence, it's also lengthening and stretching our spinal cords, creating more space between the vertebrae, which is going to help you become more sensitive to your body. Also, as you are becoming more mindful of your body, chances are you're also starting to refine your diet. So you're starting to recognize how certain substances are going to pull you out of your balance and make you agitated, let's say in the sense of maybe sugar or caffeine. Other substances might make you more lethargic and heavy, maybe if you're eating a lot of meat or you're using a lot of alcohol. You know, these type things throw the nervous system off, out of kilter. And what's interesting is that if you go too far out of kilter one way, nature's going to rebound and go and pull you out the other way. So this is why, like, for example, people who use alcohol as a way to help calm their anxiety, it may work for in the moment, but once that alcohol effect wears off, because it's a central nervous depressant, then the central nervous system will spring back, and it'll spring back, and now the anxiety is going to even be stronger than it was before, had you just tried to sit with it and watch how it moves and shifts. So refining our diet, starting to eat more locally, seasonally, is going to help keep your body more in balance and your whole nervous system more sensitive. Because ultimately what we're attempting to do in practicing in a mindfulness-based meditation practice is first we concentrate our attention on our breath so that the mind isn't wandering. Because if your mind is going into the past or if it's jumping into the future, you have no chance of being sensitive to what's going on in your body, all right? So we have to concentrate and just be present in order to now work with the sensations in the body. Once the mind is centered and calm, now all of a sudden you're going to start to feel more. And what you're going to start to feel is that throughout your body, there are sensations happening all the time. Sometimes sensations are very heavy and dense and unmistakable, but other times there are these lighter, subtler experiences that we might not have even been aware of until we started to meditate. Whether it's a heavy, dense sensation like pressure in your head or pain somewhere in your body, or whether it's something that's very light, it could be a feeling of like energy or electricity or bliss or something like that. All of those sensations share the same quality, which is that they are impermanent, that they are temporary and they are transient. And as a meditator, this becomes the key component of our practice, is to observe change. So we are learning how to watch all of these sensations as they arise and then as they ultimately subside, without becoming identified with them, without mistaking these temporary experiences as being who we are, but instead realizing that who we are is the awareness or the field in which all of these temporary manifestations are arising and then subsiding. And once we start to experience ourselves as this observer or the witness of change, then it doesn't really matter what's happening in our experience, whether it's positive or negative. Our experience of ourselves stays in this steady, equanimous, happy, blissful, easy state of being, realizing that whether there's a headache manifesting right now, or whether there's a rainstorm, or whatever happens to be the present moment, it's bound by the law of impermanence to change, to shift. And so there's no sense in getting attached to it in any way, and also there's no sense in resisting it in any way. Instead, we just acknowledge that this is the reality of the moment, and sometimes the reality of the moment will call us to take an action, and if that's the case, we'll take that action with full presence and awareness, so that action will become very skillful in nature. And one of the nice definitions of yoga I've heard is skill in action. So yoga helps you become more skillful in what you do. Another nice definition, which is related, is that yoga is space in your body. So your body feels like it becomes much more spacious than what you previously had experienced yourself to be. And of course, if you have if your sense of self is more spacious, then any particular event that arises isn't really going to affect the greater whole as much. And so an example that I'll use to students is that if you take a drop of ink and put it into a water bottle, it's going to change the color of the water where it becomes noticeable. But if you take that same drop of ink and you put it into a swimming pool, it disappears. You can't even tell that there's a drop of ink in the pool. And in essence, that's what's happening as we meditate, because we're becoming more expansive in how we identify with ourselves as being the field of everything, of conscious awareness, such that nothing that arises can really throw us off who we are. And so either we'll take an action if it's called for, or maybe what the moment will call for non-action. We just let something just burn off on itself, right? Like run itself out of its energy, and it resolves on its own. And meditation and mindfulness and practicing that will give us the skill to basically become almost automatic and effortless in how we carry on ourselves. So two of the hallmarks, if you will, of spiritual practice is that it's become spontaneous and effortless, which is interesting because there's a bit of a paradox, because in the beginning of your practice, a lot of effort's required in order to focus your attention and change the habit patterns of the mind out of time-based thinking, you know, past and future. Because anytime you think of past or future, what you're really doing is you are enforcing your sense of yourself as a person with this history and this potential future. So we want to try to eliminate that. So meditation is bringing us back into the moment, and it's giving us this opportunity to just experience things as they arise in the present without identification in any way.
I love that. Thank you. That was, I love what you said about, you know, the idea of expanding our container, or, you know, expanding our volume, our capacity to sort of hold experiences. That has been so key in my experience, what meditation does for me. I can go from feeling so constricted to more of an expansive state where I can really sort of take on anything that kind of comes my way. So thank you. That was a great example. For the listeners right now who are thinking, okay, I want to get started on a meditation practice, or maybe some mindfulness practices, how can someone incorporate this into their daily routine?
Okay, well, it's really like any new skill that you'll acquire. It takes a little bit of practice. It takes a lot of practice, but you don't have to start with a lot amount of time in the beginning. You can start with just a very small amount, and it's really starting to set the attention to pause. So these conscious pauses in your life, in your day, to simply stop and be for a little while. And that means just pausing to become aware of your breathing. And that's really probably the best way to start for a beginner, is to say, okay, for the next few minutes, I'm just going to sit in my favorite chair or sit on the floor, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to follow my breath. I'm going to follow my natural breath. So how it's coming in and how it's going out. Maybe it's through the nose or through the mouth, whatever happens to be in the present moment. And what the beginner will notice is that pretty soon after they sit and try to follow their breath, their mind's going to carry them off. And they're going to go into a memory, or they're going to start thinking about what will happen later on. And that's perfectly normal and natural. And it happens to all of us, even experienced meditators. And as soon as you realize that your mind had wandered, all you do is you come back to your breath and you reset. And you might take a little acknowledgement to yourself that, oh, I was thinking, or I was planning, or I had wandered. That's fine, and you let it go. And then you come back to your breath and you reset until the next time your mind wanders and carries you off. And then as soon as you realize that your mind had carried you off, good. That means that you came out of whatever that tangent was, and you're back in the present, and you come back to your breath and you reset. So that is really just the fundamental basics of the beginning of the meditation practice. Now, in order to help engender that practice into your daily routine, it's helpful to do it at the same time every day. So what I like to do is when I wake up, I do it just lying in bed. So I'm awake and I'm like, okay, I know I'm awake. So now it comes to just following the breath and moving through my body, doing a little bit of a scan to see how things are going. And just getting that sense of, okay, I'm present, I'm now back in my body, embodied, and now let's go into the rest of my day. I like to meditate in the morning because one, you can be more consistent with it. If you try to meditate in the afternoon or evening, there'll be a lot of times where there'll be some social call that'll maybe distract you, and you might miss a day or two here and there. So if you are able to do it in the morning, it's the best, it's the most consistent. The other thing too is, like when you do it in the morning, like I was saying just a minute ago, it really does tend to ripple forward into the rest of your day. So it's like you're getting this sense of calibration to, okay, here I am, this is what it feels like to be present in the moment, and you'll carry that forward into the rest of your day, so you'll have a more effective, efficient day than you might have otherwise. It's helpful to do it in the same place every day. So if you have a particular area in your residence, to continue sitting in that same spot. Like I said, you don't have to always sit on the floor. You can do it sitting in a chair. You can even do it lying down, but of course there's the risk that you might fall asleep. So you have to be a little careful of that. There are other options. So in this day and age, we have apps available to us. So, I can name a couple. There's Serenity, Calm, Headspace, that are all available on different platforms, and a lot of them offer free guided meditations. One of my favorite ways to meditate, at least at the beginning, was music. So I would find that if my mind was really busy, if I put on some music, it helped to really kind of center me on the music and in that present moment flow. Movement is a great type of meditation. So walking, if you're walking, to just be mindful of your breathing, of the sounds that you're hearing. And actually listening becomes its own powerful meditation too. So if you find that when you're sitting down to meditate, your mind is just so busy, it just keeps going over and over, churning, then what I recommend to people is to shift from thinking to listening. So they start to pick up on the different sounds that enter their ears from both inside and outside of the room. And that can be really helpful to people because that shifts the mind into the receptive mode. Thinking is like a transmission. It's like you putting out to the world your thoughts of what's happening, whereas listening is letting the world come to you and helping you to come back to your body and recenter. So those are some techniques. Now, the other thing I have is a timer that I use. I find that it takes about 15 minutes for the mind to truly burn off its surface level, and for a practitioner to really get that, maybe even just a short sense of complete presence and ease. So it may be that you're sitting in 15 minutes, you're thinking, but at a certain point, the mind just gives up or it burns off and you just drop into your body and into the present. And it's such a profound experience, and it's unmistakable that once you have that, you're going to look forward to experiencing it again. And even if it only lasts for a moment, you're going to recognize the value in it, and how you want to come back to that state of just, it feels like a weight is being taken off your shoulders, and you just feel free and relaxed and completely here and now. And it's enough, even just a short glimpse of it, to make you want to come back and keep practicing.
Absolutely. That's certainly been my experience of meditation. It just it's almost as if my whole body and my nervous system just softens, and I feel, okay, I'm ready for the day now.
Yeah.
So as a way to sort of wrap up today and turn insight into action, I would love it if you could lead us through maybe a 5 or 10-minute guided meditation for any of the listeners that have maybe never tried meditation, or maybe they've attempted it once or twice but just haven't really gotten into it. Yeah, I'd love it if you could lead us through just a little mini session.
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Okay, well, the first thing when you sit down to meditate or set the intention to meditate is your posture. You've got to figure out, okay, we do have this body and we are embodied, so let's make sure that we can set ourselves up in a way that is most comfortable and sustainable for our meditation practice. Now, this will be different for everybody based on your particular physical limitations. Some of us might have hip or knee issues or back issues, in which case for you it's going to be necessary to sit in a chair or have some kind of back support. So if you're one of these people that may have some difficulty sitting cross-legged, then sit in a chair, but try to sit so that your feet are flat on the floor and you're sitting a little bit forward in your chair, if that's okay for your back, because that is more conducive to a straight spine, and a straight spine will help us to stay more and more aware and alert. It's going to be hard to keep your spine straight for an extended period of time, so it's natural to have a little bit of a slouching action. But what you'll find is that as the spine slouches with gravity, after a few minutes, now this slouch position feels uncomfortable, and naturally you're going to want to straighten back up again. And now this feels good. So what I'll notice is in my 20-minute practice, my spine might oscillate once or twice just naturally with gravity. And I let that happen. So, but starting point wise, we do want to try to sit up straight, try to equalize the height of the shoulders. Now, something is called a mudra, which is a hand position, which is helpful in our practice. So a common one would be your index finger and thumb touching. That's if you have your hands on your knees with palms up or palms down. Just a quick little tip, if you're feeling drowsy and you need a little more awareness, then keep your palms up. But if you're feeling agitated, if your mind's really busy, then think about turning your palms down on your knees. But another way to meditate is having your hands in your lap with your thumbs touching. And this is one of my more preferred mudras. So I'll take this meditation today. And the idea with the mudra is it's a physical or tactile sensation. So that if your mind wanders deep in thought, chances are your mudra will separate. And so this is another way to help keep you grounded and embodied. And that's one of the roles of the mudra in our practice. Okay, the other thing is to keep your chin in so the back of your neck is long. You don't want to like jut your chin out and have a forward head carriage. Okay, so once you've set up your posture, then close your eyes. As soon as you close your eyes, it signals to awareness that our focus now is internal instead of external. And we want to initially get a sense of what's happening internally at the level of sensation. So we want to see if there's any tension in our face that we can relax and release. So what usually I'll do is I'll start around my eyes and I'll soften the muscles around my eyes. And then I'll let that softness spread through my forehead, skin of my forehead, right down into my temples. So relax your temples and separate the biting surfaces of your teeth. And let your tongue become small, let it fall right to the bottom of your mouth. And now push your sitting bones down so you can lift up through your navel and get a little taller, a little straighter. And notice how you have a little extra core support here. So this action of lifting up from the navel helps to draw the lower back into the body. And once you're feeling nice and straight like this, keep that same straightness, but then relax those muscles so you're not using effort, because that will tire you out. We don't want to use any effort. We want to do our best to just relax. And as we have done this short little scan of our body, getting a sense of any tension we can release, any rough edges that we can smooth out, then we pick up on our breath. And we want to notice, how are we breathing? How is the air coming into our body? If it's coming in through your nostrils, do you notice if one side feels like it's drawing in more air than the other? Usually there's a freer flow of air through one nostril as opposed to the other. And you may experience that when your mind is very relaxed and you're in the meditative moment, that airflow will equalize between the nostrils. And also notice now, where does the breath travel in your body? When you inhale, are you expanding your abdomen? When you exhale, are you contracting the abdomen, letting the air exhale? So here initially, see if you can take a few deep breaths so that when you inhale, you feel your abdomen expand. And then when you exhale, you feel it contract. And then we relax the breathing, the control of the breath, so that it's just natural. It may be that your breathing is shallow, or it may be that it's deep. You may notice that your breath is rapid, or maybe that it's slow. This will change from moment to moment and each time you practice. So all we're doing is observing. So let's try for a minute or so now to just watch the breath as it comes in and as it goes out. If at any time your mind wanders and you realize it, well, good, it means you came out of that distraction. Simply come back to your breath and reset. And at any time in your practice, you may consciously decide to shift from watching your breath to focusing on sounds as they enter your ears. So picking up on any sounds from both inside and outside of the room as they happen. there's certain tools that we can use in our practice from time to time. If you find that your mind is quite agitated, you're upset in any way, then try to slow down your exhalation. So breathe out as if you're breathing out through a straw. And by slowing down our breath like this, it will help keep the mind in the present. And so 3, 4, maybe 5 cycles of your breath, you can slow down your exhale, and that'll help calm and center you. But then relax control of your breath and go back to just natural breathing. You also may notice that after a few minutes of sitting and as the mind begins to slow down, that your breathing will also begin to slow down. And you may notice at the end of each exhalation, there's a pause before the new breath starts. See if you can notice these natural pauses at the end of each breathing cycle. And ideally, you would sit and continue for another 10, 15, even 20 minutes. And in those 15, 20 minutes, you'll notice that the mind comes in waves of intensity. So there'll be moments where the mind kicks up and becomes strong. You might feel some restlessness or agitation. But if you can stick with it and just breathe around it and wait for that wave to pass, it'll be followed by a deeper sense of calm and equanimity and peace. So it is these times of intensity that help develop in our nervous system a greater capacity to stay calm around them. If we allow ourselves the opportunity to sit and be with them. So those moments when you feel like you gotta wanna quit your practice, get up and leave, try to remember to say to yourself, this is a wave, it's reaching its peak and it's going to crest. And if I can just sit, relax, and try to breathe around the uncomfortable sensations, it's going to be followed by even a deeper sense of calm and equanimity. So I like to conclude my meditation practice by bringing my hands together in front of my heart. It's a gesture of integrating the opposites. So it's uniting the left with the right, the masculine with the feminine, the positive with the negative, the day with the night. To recognize that opposites contain each other and that we are integrally whole. And from this place of wholeness, from this experience of unity, may we continue to generate more and more peace, more and more presence, more and more equanimity. Namaste. So namaste is a Sanskrit word which basically translates that the presence in me, the oneness in me, recognizes the presence and the oneness in you and realizes that we are one and the same.
Josh, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the conversation. I want to thank you for your energy, your time, your wisdom. This has been so valuable and insightful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Elaine. It was really my pleasure.